Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Black Sand Journals. I'm here with my good friend, Adam Gohn. And this is my very first opportunity to interview someone. So please forgive me if I'm a little off, but this is a new experience, and new experiences are good because it helps us to learn and grow. So I'm going to give Adam an opportunity to tell us a little bit about himself and what brings him here today.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Seti. This is a new experience for me too, because I'm doing shows as well, which I think you mentioned on your episode 6. Um, I I have up until this point get to ask the question, so I have a little bit of an idea what I'm getting into. So you must be really enjoying it. I am too. It's a good nervousness. So this will be a first for both of us, and I appreciate you making the time and the trust to have me on your show. Thanks, brother.
Fantastic. For those who haven't seen or have not been to Adam's channel yet, um, actually, let's go right into the first question here.
Yeah.
Adam, if you could share with us what it is that brought you to this platform. I know you're very active on X and Rumble and other social media platforms.
Yeah.
Tell us about your channel and what prompted you to start it.
Yeah, I want to fast forward to what it is for me and this channel, and then I'll kind of back into where that came from. The title of it is Conversations in Higher Vibrations. I never liked the label of podcast. It felt commercial to me. It really just is a conversation. And part of what I really wanted to do is, as much as I like to talk, I didn't want it to be just me talking. So I wanted to do it with someone or with a group of people that'll join one or many conversations. You were one of those. To be able to talk to people about anything that is towards the goal of higher vibrations for us all. I know that's a very general term. Higher vibrations meaning if that's helping people, if that's forgiving people, if that's talking about things that might help improve your health, mind, body, and soul. Those are the things that we would cover on this show. And even in 5 episodes, we've covered like across many things. So that's the general term, which some might say, well, that's not specific enough. That's that's where that goes. And then just to back into how this happened, many things I could say, but I would say you mentioned X, and formerly known as Twitter. I joined X about a year ago, not necessarily sure of what the plan was to do it, but I wanted to help and felt so much from my heart that I just wanted to help. That was as far as I took it. And so there was different types of phases that I kind of went through on X. Some of it was politics, some of it was um, other pieces, and I began to feel, I'm going to say, hollow from, especially from the politics side. Not that I won't talk about it now, but I wanted to be able to frame it in a way that's positive for something that you and I and anyone who watches this can do. What is some real immediate things to just help each other and help ourselves? So, moving forward to where that kind of moved about a couple months ago, I'm going to say September or October, I really started to dig into things that I would call, generally speaking, again, spirituality. And then only a couple weeks ago, when you launched your show, I was very excited, very supportive of you. And I asked a question to say, can I join? As in, can I be on a show or on a number of shows? And you did me one of the greatest services to me. You said no. Now, I'll explain what that means to your audience. You're like, well, isn't he on right now? Yes, that's true. But what Seti told me is, and Seti can use his own reasons for it. What I'm going to say is, um, he felt a need that his show should stand alone and be his, and I should do my own thing. And that's the reason why I'm sitting here. And that's the reason why I've started my own podcast, um, my own conversations. And so, Seti, I apologize for putting you in that situation by
Not at all.
asking the question. And I praise you for putting up your healthy boundaries and saying no. You said it in a kinder way, but that was that was the takeaway. So anyway, go ahead, brother.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, we've talked about this several times. the importance of saying no in a kind way,
Mhm.
um, for various reasons. But just to dig into that a little bit more from my perspective, I felt like we all have different views of the world.
Right.
And it wasn't that I didn't feel like you would be a benefit to me on my channel. Uh, in fact, a lot of times we've had conversations and I felt very inspired by the things that you said and continue to say. But I felt strongly that your audience needed to hear your voice, your
Right.
unique perspective in the world, and having me blended in there might, I, I felt might have turned some people off that are already following you. So I know that it was meant to be that you would start your own thing, and I've been I've watched every single one of your episodes so far, and a lot of wonderful things. I know you work with a good friend of yours that you met through social media, George,
Yeah.
and I'd like to dig a little bit deeper on some of the higher vibration things that you guys have talked about, whether it's politics related or personally related experiences that you guys have had so far. So I
Yeah.
hope that it's been beneficial for you.
It's it, so you tend to have emotion on, these shows, and sometimes there's a tissue available. Mine is in my skin and chills. So once you said that, like, that's kind of one of those things. Um, I did want to ask or clarify something for you. So you mentioned you watched all the episodes. Did you do it on YouTube or on Rumble?
I did it on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mentioned that for you, that there's an episode that didn't make it to YouTube
Right.
because of some of the what I'm going to call alternative technologies. So all of the clips from that are out on YouTube. And I'm not saying you have to go see it. That's up to you. But the person I had mentioned that I talked to, who had an experience with some frequency technology, she was just giving her experience, what she's done for her, both herself and for actually a pet of hers. And I've learned that with YouTube, which, not disparaging it, I get it, but there's censorship where you can say things of an experience, but if you go a little too far to saying it did this for me with like a resolute belief, um, YouTube will typically take it down. And that happened to me even on the second episode. So I only say all that to say the full content will always be on Rumble, but some of it I will choose to either clip out a part because I know it won't pass the sniff test for YouTube, or I'll just put clips on it that talk to that. Um, so that's the only thing I would say. I think it's episode 4 that's over on that, but the clips are here
Okay.
on YouTube.
Great.
Um, so what part did you want me to kind of talk through first? Was it George? Was it some of the things we've covered? What would you like me to start with?
Yeah, actually, that's a good segue into the next question that I had, and you touched on it a little bit. And for the listening audience, uh, this past week I had this experience with Adam from a spiritual perspective. When he talks about higher vibrations, I had I have this major. I'm sure everyone feels this way sometimes when you have a dentist appointment.
Yeah.
But I had a little bit of a procedure where a tooth was extracted. Um, and Adam, if you're okay sharing this
Yeah.
here, did some spiritual healing. Tell us a little bit about that and what that entails, and I'll give you my experience from this past week.
Yeah. I'm happy to answer any questions I can. So I would frame this in a way of saying that it's very focused prayer. There's some very specific things that I say, but for the audience, just talking to you directly, it's really a focused prayer for me. God is absolutely included. God is center to all of it. The things I say give all glory to God. And when someone like Seti is, I'm going to say, suffering or going into something, I offer to do a prayer session, a prayer healing session, and I do that for my own reasons to ask it. I know that you could pray for anyone that you want to, but the reason why I asked you, Seti, and I've done this for a lot of people now. Uh, maybe a dozen or so, and 4 or 5 dozen total. And it's not to make it such a formal thing or that it's anything important about me. It's all God. And it's about your part in it, as more so than me. It's a connection between you and God. And I like to inform you of that because I think it matters about what you're feeling or believing or having faith in. Does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And for the audience, Adam had reached out, knew that I was having this procedure, and I had that anxiety, so I needed his prayers, his healing prayers, on my behalf to get me through that anxiety and the pain that I was sure that I was going to experience. And over the last 3 days, um, Adam has been doing those remote healing sessions, praying on my behalf, and I've felt the power of those prayers. The anxiety was not as bad as I thought. I did feel the pain when I wasn't using ibuprofen, and I don't know if I
Yeah.
even should say the drugs, but um, I did feel like I could go a little bit longer without having to rely on medication. So I I've really been grateful for that connection that we've had, as you said, through God, and I've felt the power and the healing through those prayers.
I'm I'm thrilled to hear that. And that power is directly, from God to you. And if I'm included in it, that's great. Um, I appreciate you sharing that. And most importantly, I'm thrilled that your recovery's been better. And maybe this is me knowing it's going on YouTube, but I'll say it this way. This is not a promise to say that what I'm doing is doing anything different other than sending you those positive vibrations, and that I care about you. I care about you, Seti. I love you.
Thank you.
Say it on camera. You've heard me say it plenty of times outside of that. Some of your audience might be like, who's this guy? I mean, he loves him. He knows him. He doesn't know him like I do. And I respect that. But I love you like a brother. And when I am in a prayer session or just in general, I am thinking of you and all the goodness and the perfectness of you that is here right now. And that's probably the piece I'll highlight here is that in what I say, I don't wish for anything. I don't hope for anything. I talk about what is right now and immediate. Some might call that manifesting. Some might call that just being in the moment. But when I won't go through the entire spiel of it, but I'll tell you, Seti, that I talk in terms of your perfect health and your reclaimed healing that is immediate right now. Whether or not you feel it yet, it is right here and it's right now. That's the power of prayer that I feel is important.
Fantastic, and I appreciate that's it's reciprocated. We've talked about this often, and there's just people that will will cross paths with in life, and some of them come and go. There's lessons to learn from each one of them,
There
but there
is.
are some definitely people. Everybody can attest to this that will stay in our lives for the rest of our lives,
Yes, there
and
will.
there's purpose for that. And just so that our audience knows, and maybe if you have a chance, go out and listen to our interview. I actually did this same process with Adam on his channel, Going All In.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and he asked me the same types of questions. And uh, for just a little bit of background, if I could take a step back for
Yeah.
those who did not take an opportunity to listen, I actually Adam and I work together. We have work history together, and I reported to Adam as one of his people workers, and had an amazing experience. He's a wonderful mentor, and uh, it, if you could have people like Adam in your life that you could rely upon, and I've had many. Adam happens to be the most recent, and we look forward to many associations. Our friendship continues to grow, and our brotherhood continues to grow. So,
Yeah.
just getting back to that, what you mentioned here, I do you feel sometimes that we often maybe misunderstand is the wrong word, or there's a misconception about prayer. I feel prayer is one of the most untapped um, resources of power that we have in our life.
Yeah.
And many people don't understand what prayer can do for us personally, but also for the people that we love. Any thoughts on that?
A lot. A lot. So, um, one thing before I jump into this, I will say, and this isn't your Q&A, so you don't have to answer this, but you shared with me well after the fact a couple things. You shared with me after the fact that you prayed for me and us together. You want to share on that later? Great. That was, I'm not often surprised anymore because I expect anything to happen, and it's with love and compassion that it does. I had not expected, um, I'm getting emotional on this. I had not expected you to have the importance for me that I have felt for you. And that wasn't, maybe that was me dismissing myself a little bit, but I tend to focus very much on other people and caring for them and not keeping track of whether they care for me in return, because it's not about me it's not about that person when you're giving love and compassion. So when you said that you had prayed for me and us in the context that you felt, that was really moving, um, stunningly moving for me. And so thank you for that. I have tremendous gratitude for you. Um, as far as back to your question on, can you reframe that again so I can go back to what the thought was I was going to say?
Yeah, yeah. It was just about what are your thoughts on prayer in general?
Yeah.
Because I believe that many times we dismiss the power of prayer, or maybe don't understand it, and your experiences so far.
Yeah, thank you. So there's a couple things I want to try to frame up for this, and for your audience, it might be helpful for me to kind of explain it. These aren't my words. This actually comes from George, who's my co-host. Um, he calls it something a little bit different, maybe, but I'll frame it this way. Um, let's talk about the term of God. So God is the source. God can be what you call it. Um, I tend to refer to God as prime creator. Why do I do that? I have my own reasons, but I'm talking about God. So I'm going to frame it as in God. So imagine God as the underlying, you and I are in software, or I used to be, you are now, I'll return at some point. God is the underlying source code, or maybe you want to say he's the overlying source code. And so the way to access God can happen in many different ways. So I'm gonna pretend for a moment that you could access God through a phone. I know that you don't do it that way, but so God's that source, and there's a phone, and a phone has apps. So there might be a God app. There might be a hey bro, I'm sending you positive vibes app. There might be a I'm in the mountains or on the beach and the cliffs and the mountain that you talk about in Samoa. Um, it could be through the laughter of a child. And so those are different apps that you're all accessing God. And so, however you get to God is what I think matters the most, not the way that you get it. And that's not disparaging finding it in the mountains. It's not disparaging religion. It's not disparaging, hey, bro, positive vibes. Here's a song I thought of you about. Any way that you get there, you get there. What matters is the effort and the intention to get to God. Does that make sense so far?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, so as far as prayer, um, I think for some people that prayer has a connotation to it that's not positive. Meaning, if I say, Seti, I'm going to pray for you, or maybe someone from my hometown, if I'm like, I'm going to pray for you, or maybe in the South, you're like, I'm going to give you some prayers. That sounds a little bit like, okay, I feel a little judged. I don't feel like this is a kind effort. So I want to try to sit that maybe dogma to the side and say that whether you want to call it prayer and you want to call it God, or you want to call it a healing session like I do and call it and call God prime creator, I view it as all the same thing. So I hope I'm answering your question. If not, I can kind of go deeper on it. But I think that's where prayer, or if you want to call it meditation, just all the labels. And you've even said this on your show, and I've watched all of yours too. Thank you for watching mine. Um, I think it sometimes matters who the audience is when they hear those type of words, because words really matter. I'm learning over time to be much more measured. I can feel it even in this conversation. I'm being more measured in how I say things, not because I'm withholding anything. This is all what I feel and what I believe, and my words and truth. But I also understand that people watching this may need to hear it in a different way. So I hope that makes sense and answers your question relative to prayer.
Definitely. I appreciate all that great insight from a different perspective. We've talked about this many times, and you see it a lot online, where we can often fall victim to our own bubble. When we're in an echo chamber, we start to say and do things in a way that when we go outside of that, it's a shock to our system.
It is.
But I'm recalling, uh, badly, by the way, the the words to a hymn that we often sing in our own faith. And there's a phrase in there that says, "Prayer is the soul's sincere desire," and that to me is the power of prayer. From an individual's perspective, what is it that you desire the most at this moment from your prime creator, God, etc. And when uh, I don't, there's been a shift for many of us where prayer is more a conversation with that being or whatever it is you worship. It's an actual conversation where you stand um, on behalf of yourself or others to say the things that are in your heart in as a conduit, if I could use that word, as a conduit to God for another person. My deepest and most sincere prayers have been on behalf of other people,
Yeah.
not on myself,
Yeah.
because I'm a lot like you. It's like I don't need too much. I think I'm doing okay, but there's some other people that really need this right now.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that insight because it aligns with the things that I've grown up and believed, and it's built kind of not barrier is the wrong word, but it's fortified my heart for other people
Right.
through prayer.
Yeah.
So, all right, good. Thank you so much for that. You want to shift now to the next question, or you
I'm
have
all in.
anything else to add there?
No, I'm all in. Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Uh, I hope this one isn't too uncomfortable, but I'd like to hear if you
Okay.
if you would share a difficult experience that you've had, whether it's in the past or recently, and how you were able to overcome that, whether it's through your spirituality or through the support and love of other people. What do you think?
Um, I'm going to go with probably about 10 years or so ago. Um, I went through, and it actually, I'll start it a different way. It was 10 years ago. I, for me, in my opinion, was very misled, um, heavily self destructive. And I don't mean it in a way of things happened to me. I mean, I brought it on myself. I would say, in general, for me in my life has been relatively easy, save for the times that I have taken myself to, I'll say, darkness. I'm a believer that there's light and dark in all of us, and I am no different. And so I went through a period of time when my kids were very young and through a divorce, which I'm accepting responsibility for my piece in that because I was a lot of it. And since that time, which has been many phases from that point on. And I don't think it's as much about a specific event as it was a divorce or it was a this or it was a that. It was at that point in my life, I was saying without realizing it, I am ready. I'm ready to move to a different vibration and find a way to be positive. Um, at that point in time, that was difficult. And each day and each month and each year, through lots of my own internal struggles and I'll say triumphs, a fair amount of therapy, fair amount of book reading and things, fair amount of accepting humility when um, I was a little blocked from really being able to do that, brought me to a place of forgiveness. And I talk about this a lot. You do too. Um, I had to, without ever telling anyone, some I told, but a lot I did not. I found forgiveness for other people without ever having told them. And I found forgiveness for myself, which which I think is only possible when you're really able to put down your armor and expose your heart and say, I have done very bad things, or I've thought very bad things, or I've embraced this darkness within myself, and I'm done with that. Now, when I say done, I mean it's an evolution. It wasn't as if all of a sudden I'm fixed and here, here we go. So, how I overcame that, um, I overcame it really through forcing myself, and I would say a higher power, God, without me realizing it was that, to do that. And forgiveness is the biggest thing. So if I can answer that in one word to anyone listening, it's forgiveness. And I believe forgiveness has to start with yourself. You have to forgive yourself. And then you have to forgive other people that may not feel, you have to forgive other people that you might not think are deserving of that forgiveness. The reason is because forgiveness, it's actually for you. It's not allowing those people to rent more space in your head than you should be. Learn from something and move on.
Ah, that's beautiful. Yeah, we have talked about that a lot, and forgiveness is a big thing, isn't it? It requires some humility. It requires, like you said, not so much letting go of the lessons and the experiences that you learned from going through that trial, or however you'd like to frame that, but it also requires, like you said, first of all, forgiving yourself, giving yourself some grace, understanding that you're human and you're learning from
Right.
the process. But um, I also look at it as sometimes you just have to write that debt off to that person.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like we've had that experience where you loan someone money and you think, am I going to get that $100 back?
Right.
Maybe not, but
Maybe
it
not.
has to be given with the intent that you may not get it back.
So this brings me to a great point that I would say, and I say it often. My wife probably gets tired of hearing me say it. Um, and it's along the same lines of forgiveness for yourself and forgiveness to others. Um, I have a very specific reason as to why I haven't told several people that I've forgiven them, because it's not for them. With all
Yeah.
due respect, it's not for them. Um, my that forgiveness is for myself, and you can love and care for someone afar without them having known it. That isn't me being callous. It's me knowing that if I were to say, I forgive you for what you've done for me, the response I probably wouldn't have accepted very well, because that response, maybe it would have been, but maybe it wouldn't have been positive. So what I kind of hear you saying about that is write it off. It's the same thing I mean when I'm saying don't let this person or this event, good or bad, high or low, don't let that define how you feel. Write off what that is. And I'll go one step further, and then would like to hear kind of what you think, Seti. And I don't mean to frame this in Q&A for us both.
No, no,
Um, you mentioned about writing it off. That is a hugely powerful thing. Um, whether it's through prayer, meditation, or just yourself talking to yourself. Writing that off releases you. It releases you from that burden, and forgiveness of yourself and others, I believe, is how you get there.
absolutely. There's a lot of power in that, isn't there? Because if you let if you carry that around with you, that's weight that you don't need to.
Yep.
And in my belief system, in my faith, when you carry it around, then you're dismissing, in my mind, you're dismissing the atonement that was paid on your behalf by Jesus Christ.
That's
That's
right.
my belief.
Yeah,
And if it's already been paid for, then why do I need to carry it as well?
correct. You
Yeah,
nailed it.
yeah.
This is I appreciate you sharing that, and it brings me to something I wanted to say. So, for anyone listening, so Seti and I, in my opinion, are very aligned. But Seti, he accesses that source code, right? He accesses God through religion and through the LDS, through his church. My access is different. But the amount of commonalities that he and I have together, which might feel really alien to some watching, like they're approaching from totally different spheres, and I just respectfully don't agree with that. Um, it does take SETI to hear me and where I'm at, and not try and have me frame it in a way that he needs me to. And it's also me framing it in a way that I don't need Seti to be anyone different than the beautiful, amazing person that he is, flaws and all, darkness and light and all. So, and same thing for me. So thank you, Seti.
You're very welcome, and thank you for sharing that. And you're right. I feel we're very kindred spirits when it comes to our spirituality, regardless of how we access the code.
Yes,
So
we are.
thank you for that, and
You're
thank you
welcome.
for being open and honest about the experience that you had to go through. Um, Speaking of your family, I'm switching gears back and forth here, so
Let's do it.
please
Let's
forgive
do
me.
it.
You mentioned your children,
Yeah.
and if it's okay with me sharing, you're remarried,
Yep.
blended family.
That's right.
What type of legacy would you like to leave these wonderful individuals that you and your wife are raising together?
Legacy. That does give me a little bit of pause. I'm trying to think of that. Because probably the term legacy feels, for me, that it's not a humble thing to say. I'm going to leave this legacy, and this is going to be for all to enjoy. And I know that's not how you mean it, but there's a part of me trying to filter what that is. Um, the legacy I would like to leave for my children, all five of them. I needed to catch up to you somehow, Seti. So that's how I called up. Two biological and three stepchildren. Um, the legacy I would like to leave for them is me leading by example. Sometimes in a way of having to say, you need to do this, you need to do that. But sitting those kind of parental obligations aside, the legacy I'd like to leave for them is for them to follow their own heart. And of course, I am a parent and a step parent. I would prefer that if they make mistakes, which they will, that they're non permanent mistakes, or things that they're able to overcome in their own journey. And I will say I've learned that from many people, some family, some friends, and many of the lessons that I will say from my own grandfather, who has left this earth realm. He's home now. Um, he would say things to me. I was telling my wife just before we got on here, maybe an hour or two ago, and was talking to one of our children. And I said, just kind of, it's one of those things where you're sort of in the room, and you're in the room with your child, and you're talking, and some of it may sink in, some of it may not. He did that with me. And there's a couple specific examples that he gave me when we're driving along in a pickup truck and I'm in high school. And he mentioned these things, and I thought, I don't even do that right now. Or I don't even, thinking from the lens of a kid, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know where that came from.
Why are you
But it,
telling me this?
right. But it stuck with me. And 3 years later, 10 years later, or now, let's see, I'll be 44 next month. So, 30 years later, I think of those times really often, of what he shared with me at that point in time that I wasn't ready to hear, but my heart heard it. And that's the legacy he left for me. And that's the kind of legacy that I'd like to leave for my children. Make your own decisions, follow your heart. And that's what I like to leave them with. Yes. Maybe
Amazing.
not tomorrow, but
Yeah,
eventually leave them with that. Yes.
amazing. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, legacies, because we're writing our own story, but other
Yeah.
people have a story about us.
Yep.
and they have their own legacy, uh, or vantage point of a legacy that we've left for them, and it's individualistic. But I shared in my last episode that I had I go to funerals because I love to hear the stories and perspectives that other people have about their loved one who has passed.
I bet you learned so much that you
You
hadn't
learn a
heard
ton from
before.
those experiences, yeah. And that's one of the things I love that you shared, that their own individuality, their authenticity matters to you. So um, yeah, that's the reason I asked that question, because we don't know how people see us,
We
but
don't.
we definitely know how we see ourselves, and we want to leave the world a better place. I believe that.
If I
Um,
may, if
Go
I
ahead.
may say it too, this comes off, well, actually, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't come off wrong. So I'll just say it. Um, it's not, Seti, what someone thinks of you is not your business. And I say that
Right.
with love and respect. It's not
That's
your
right.
business. And you want to be liked. I want to be liked. I want to be liked less so now. And I would like to get to a point, and I feel like it's pretty close. Not being complete, not being perfect. That's not what I mean. But the business of what people think of me is not my business. It's theirs. I can just be grounded in my heart and all those things that that is. And it might not sound like that's humility and being humble, but I do believe that it is. If you believe in your heart, you're embracing the light within you as opposed to the dark. It's not your business what other people think. And you're going to continue evolving. The other thing that makes me think of this, and especially I as a kid or well into my 20s, probably into my 30s, less so now, hopefully. Um, you I did. I don't know about you, but I tended to look at other people. If Seti, you and I would have met in my mid 20s, I would have looked at you as a static, this is who Seti is. He's never going to change. This is who he
Right.
is. So
Right.
I just navigate around. I'm the only, me, speaking of humility, that was a very non humble way to act. I'm going to navigate around Seti because this is who he is. He'll always be this way. He's always been this way. He was born this way. So I'm just going to navigate around, and then that was me, in my opinion, trying to control every situation. So, I'd quickly I'd think that I knew everything that was going on. I'll do a profile of who this person is. Here's who Seti is, and I'll navigate around that. And that's just not how humans work. Your parents, my parents, they are the person that they are right in that moment. And I don't know who the quote is from, but it's from some quote. It's not from me. None of us are under any obligation to be the person we were yesterday, let alone 3 seconds ago. I know
Yeah.
I'm not. And I think that matters in the context of when you hear experiences and stories of different people and you going to funerals and hearing that. That's what I'm hearing that, be said. If I can go on parents a second, then I'll pipe down.
Let's do it.
On parents, um, all parents are doing the best that they can. There's some that certainly can meet their obligations better. There's some that do so much more and their kids turn out the way that they do. And sometimes as a child, you expect your parents to know everything, even though you told them they're not. You expect them to be able to do everything for you, even if they cannot. And you expect this like ivory tower person. And then you grow up and you listen to them more. Or like you said, to, you're at a funeral and you're listening, you're like, they were an amazing human being, flaws and all. And I at least for me personally did not think of it that way, you know, in my 20s and 30s. I'll say
Yeah.
that. And before.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you, because I look back on my life, and humility was a foreign thing to me in many instances, because as a very emotional, many times off angry person, I wanted people to act and behave in a way that was aligned with how I wanted them to be.
Right.
And if that didn't happen, it was like, hey, you're you're not on my you're on the wrong list with me.
Yeah, it's I was telling my wife last night after I watched episode 6 of yours. So I won't tell the whole idea here because we haven't filmed it yet, but I do want to do it. Um, I'd come up with this intro for you and I, which will get made. I'm manifesting that it will get made. And the only theme I'll mention is it involves you and I being in a boxing ring and being opponents. And then I
Right.
heard episode 6 and I heard some of what you shared, and I was like, well, no wonder I would have thought of a boxing match. I had no idea that that was part of you, but now it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
It makes
Yeah.
complete sense to me as to why. Anyway,
Yeah. But that's a good, I mean, it's, I, I hadn't intended for those, that sidetrack. But I think it's an important conversation for all of us to have, whether it's the parenting styles or relationship in general, relationships in general. Um, it requires a lot of humility to have good, solid relationships. And there's going to be people who are like, okay, I love you, but I'll
right,
love you from a distance.
correct,
And then there's people where you say, I really love being around this person.
right.
And those are the keepers, aren't they?
They are
But like you said, we can't pick and choose how those interactions happen. They'll happen organically, just like this conversation.
right,
And it's up to us how we react in those situations and how that relationship can develop. There are some relationships in my life that started out really bad, but now they're the most treasured and cherished relationships that I have because I'll tell you this real quick. When we first moved to Samoa, I was a young guy. Um, I learned very quickly. We hear a lot of different things about my culture and people,
yeah,
but one of the things that loved in Samoa was they just say what's on their mind.
right.
Everything is unfiltered. So you don't have to guess what it is on your mind. Here's a quick example. We sit down, we're talking to my dad and my mom's family members, and one of the things that I often heard was, and they say it in Samoan, obviously, but they would say, "Oh man, you're so fat." And as an American, I kind of, even as a young American, I step back and like,
I'm offended.
"That's rude," you know.
I have feelings too, you know.
I'm so offended, but it wasn't said in a in a hurtful way. It was
Right.
actually delivered in a lighthearted manner,
Yeah.
and from their perspective, it was almost saying, you're bigger, which means you're blessed. You have all the food in the world at your disposal, whereas
Right.
I have to go up into the mountains or down to the ocean to fish or plant crops. So I'm moving all the time. They
Right.
don't understand. They're just saying their perspective of how they're seeing you at that in that moment.
Right.
And I love brutal honesty because I don't have to guess what's on your mind.
Yeah.
I think I don't know how you feel, but I think we could do with that a lot more in a kind way. But I just think sometimes when we're trying to skirt around what we're feeling, then what's going to come out is too filtered for the audience, and now I have to guess how you're going to react.
Yeah, I agree with you. The term highly you know, I don't like labels, but the term highly sensitive people might come to mind. So,
Yeah, yeah,
um, and I mean that in a positive way, but because you feel empathy for children, for each other, for animals, for things like that. But then the other part of it is if you take that too far, which anything even good is too far, you start filtering or withholding things in a way that moves too far away from your true self. And I'm going to make a linkage here that you'll probably get, maybe, maybe not. The audience might not. So I want to start from a place of respect and love, though, to say, I get it, Seti. You and I grew up in very different places. We don't look the same. A lot of people watching this might say, I don't see how these two have a connection that they supposedly claim. But there's linkages everywhere, in my opinion. So one that you mentioned in Samoa of people being very direct, which you appreciate. Where I grew up in small farm country in Pennsylvania, I I received that same directness, and it isn't, I don't think, from a place of darkness or maybe hate. And if some of it is, that's not my business. But
sure.
in that way that you're describing, I would get that same type of comment very commonly. Oh, you're really thin. Why aren't you eating? Or you're really fat. What's going on? Or what's going on with your hair or whatever, and to to realize that there's a lesson in all of those things, if only for yourself, it's huge.
Yeah.
You had mentioned, I forget what episode it is now, you're going to have so many, soon you'll be up doing episode 222, which is what I say. That's manifesting that it will happen. In some ways, I think it already has. Um, you had mentioned when you go to Samoa, and you can reframe this, that if you aren't careful, or if you don't expect it, you'll leave with, maybe not the shirt even on your back,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
things like that. And you should expand on that if you'd like to, because I'm probably not getting it all correct. But it brought me to a thought that I've been trying to see how I can bring back up in this conversation. Here you are bringing it up. Um, you'd mentioned about if you lend someone $100, it may or may not come back and write it
Yep.
off.
Yep.
That, I think, is a huge thing, because I have learned over time, still learning, that when you make a decision to do something, it cannot be because someone else talked you into it. It cannot be because I felt pressured, or I felt an obligation, or I felt guilt, or I felt this or that.
Or
Because if
expect
you,
something in return.
correct,
Yeah.
because if you do any of those things, you're going to have resentment when it doesn't happen the way you are. You're on a checklist and you're keeping score.
Yep.
So, Seti, me giving time to someone, you giving time or money or whatever it is to someone, I encourage everyone listening to this that when you make that decision, it's got to be your own. There are decisions I've made even this week where I've said no to something and put up a boundary, not because I couldn't have said yes and it'd have been relatively painless, but and it probably actually would have went the conversation would have went easier, but I didn't agree to it because I felt in my heart I wasn't okay with the consequences of that possible decision. So I had to say no. But I've only learned that over time. I've done a lot of things, and I agreed to something under duress, let's call it, or be out of guilt or something else. And then later it happens the way I knew it was going to happen that way, or I knew this was going to happen, or I knew that. And then I get angry at the other person. For what reason? No, no. You have to be your own advocate in everything.
Yep. Yep. That's that's absolutely right. And as you're as you're talking, I forgot to mention that I love the fact that it's none of your business how that person responds to the giving or anything that I say. That's a great way to look at it because um, if you go into those interactions, let's say, for example, I see an uncle and an aunt that I haven't seen for a while,
Yeah.
and I know that I'd like to give them a gift. Well, that's what it's called. It's a gift.
Right. Right.
And if I give a gift in front of others with the intention of um, trying to influence everyone else on my actions,
Right.
then my then my intentions are unrighteous in a way because I'm doing it with an expectation that I'm going to receive something in return. Sometimes uh, that means that I'm doing it because I want to feel good about myself.
Right.
Sometimes I think that's okay,
I
especially
agree.
if especially if I'm doing it because I'm feeling bad about something I've done or said to someone else. I may not go back and say, "Hey, I'm sorry that this happened," but like you said in the beginning, you state your intentions as far as forgiveness and you let it go.
Yep.
Whereas in these situations where you're very right, where you're doing something with an expectation, I think that's where gift giving there's a very gray area there. So I go back to my experiences in Samoa and I say, even when I get off the plane, I've already made a decision in my mind
Right.
that whatever I do, whatever I say, and whatever I give is given out of love. And
Yep.
there's no expectations because you're right. If I walk away from that interaction and there's even a hint of resentment because of what I just did towards that other person, then I'm practicing unrighteous feelings toward that person. I
I
don't know if
agree.
that makes sense. I'm not, I'm struggling to find the word, not unrighteous, but just that interaction is no longer in my mind. It no longer has pure intentions.
Correct. It doesn't. I'll add another word to love. You're talking about, in my opinion, unconditional love,
Yeah.
which most of us can feel very much for children. And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
But unconditional love is what I think you're talking directly to, which is hand in hand with forgiveness for yourself and forgiveness for others.
Yeah.
So unconditional love has no attachment. It doesn't think about the goodness or the badness or the rightness or the wrongness. It just thinks about the act and
Yeah.
the intention and the effort. And that comes from
Exactly.
here. It doesn't come from what you're thinking. And I won't go off on a science tangent, but you think through your heart. And if people need science, I'm happy to share that. Not on this podcast, but not on the show rather. But yeah, I think you're talking about unconditional love and you doing that. You're making that decision. The plane is landing maybe, and you're saying, I am going to do this, or if this presents itself, I will do it. You're already choosing to assume your own responsibility, be within yourself, and you're going to give unconditionally through love. And regardless of what the response is, you're going to still love that person unconditionally. So,
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you're right. That was the exact word that I was looking for is unconditional, because you can't place conditions on charity.
no, you
It,
can't.
if whether it's a physical, a tangible gift that you're giving, or if it's your heart that you're giving, you have to do it without conditions. You and I both know from working in software, when developers are going through that code, and probably I my experience with software, and very limited, by the way, with software or code, is a number of if statements. If this happens, then this happens.
Yep.
If this, then this. And I think sometimes we can get mired down by the if statements.
Yep.
Whereas without conditions, we can walk into an interaction, whether it's someone that we've had some difficulties with. If I walk into that and say, I'm going to give this person grace
Yeah.
again and again and again until we can figure out where we can meet in charitable love or unconditional love.
So, thank you for sharing that because I want to try to reframe this and see if it meets the mark where you're going to. That's freeing, even talking about code, which some people are like, God, I'm having trouble staying awake on this. That actually makes me think of it in a great different way. So you have all these if then statements. Well, if we all know that there are if then statements, and again, I'm going to say this many times, that comes from your heart. That doesn't come from overthinking in your brain and having all this brain chatter of, well, if this happens, what do I do? If this happens, removing all those scenarios and realizing in your heart, those if then statements are there from source, maybe not from source code, but from God. Um, and you know that it's unconditional love, you have the answers within you for all of those if then statements. If you know, Seti, that you're saying, or I'm saying, I'm going to give this person this, and regardless of what comes back in return, I am doing it from my heart and from unconditional love, then you have all the if then statements of what happens, including if they're like, I can't believe you give me this. This is, how dare you, or anything. Maybe it's that type of, then the then statement will be, you love this person unconditionally. You may love them from afar now. That's okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what I'm kind of hearing from you describe.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit it on the nail. And relationships we know are complex, but I think if we approach those relationships without those conditions in place, then we walk away feeling good about ourselves because we don't go into it knowing that I can make this as hard as I want or as easy as I want.
Yeah, you really can. It's it. You mentioned about like give me a time in your life, and I'm almost feeling I went through that really quickly from a time that took me years and is still taking me. All that you and I are talking about, it might seem through the lens of someone watching this to say, well, they must have it all figured out, but that's not me. That's not how
Right.
that works. They don't understand the struggles. And you're right. I don't understand the struggles of what people who might watch this are saying are going through. And I
Yeah.
respect that. And with love and respect, I would also respond with saying, this is an ongoing thing. Everyone's
Yeah.
path is different. I believe
Yeah.
myself that our home is all the same, whether you want to call that heaven, the other side of the veil, pick whatever you'd like.
Yeah.
But from a spirituality standpoint, the destination's the same for me. How we get there just is our current agreement in this life and in this journey on this wonderful, challenging, interesting earth realm we find ourselves in. So,
Amazing. Amazing. All right. Final question for me, and then I'll open it up to you to share whatever it is on your heart. I
yeah,
know in previous conversations you'd mentioned, and we've talked about this when we worked together, that there is a specific time of the year when you go out into nature. You're a hunter. Tell me a little bit about you talk about higher vibrations
yeah,
and the connection that you feel to God or to your prime being when you're out in nature. That's your temple. Tell me a little bit more about that, and if you could,
yeah,
um, how does that connect your spirit to nature and to God, or maybe that's the same thing?
yeah. I'm I'm going to start when it first happened for me, which I think is around the same time you told me about experience of your I think you called it your sacred place.
Yeah.
So the mountains, which as you can see from like this picture, which is from that area, and this one's not, that's probably more southwest, but it's the same point across with my wife, got me both of these. I sent her this picture. I was deer hunting on a, you know, early, cold, snowy morning, probably at 5 a.m. or something. My phone was tucked in my pocket. I was ready to start hunting. Daylight had just broken. And I turned around and I saw that image and I took a bunch of pictures and then I sent them to her and she saw that one and she said, I need to frame that for him. And I had it at Christmas. Um, that's me now describing that. And I've seen many sunrises um, in that place, the most I've ever seen. Some at the beach, but you know, I'm not getting up at sunrise here in regular life most of the time. So at 12 years old, I started hunting and all for sustenance. At times I would donate it. At times I probably didn't consume all of it, especially in my early years. And I will say for me, and I'll get back to your point as to how I find spirituality, because this might seem a little odd that I'm starting this way. As a kid, I was doing it because my grandfather went there, my father went there, and I felt I wanted to do that too. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be out. Um, I was not in very good shape at that point. I was speaking of fat. I was a larger kid, um, and and so it was hard on me. And um, in the first couple years, I didn't have a lot of success, and I think there's a reason for that. And I'm talking on a spiritual level. And for a couple years, I just kept grinding, if you will, like walking more. I lost weight, not just because of that, but just in general. And that time forced me, I'll say, to spend it alone. My father, and if he ever sees this, he doesn't even know that I do shows yet. At some point, he'll see it, and then maybe he'll see this. But um, I'm sure the statute of limitations runs out on this, just like you said to when you say things. And I hadn't
Yeah.
thought of this. But you know, when I was 12 and 13, you're supposed to always be with someone. Even at
Yeah.
the time when I started back in 93, 94.
Yep.
And so we'd sit together for a little while and he'd be like, I'm going to go for a walk. And I'm like, oh, okay. He'd go for a walk and he'd be gone for hours. And to a kid, it felt like I've been here for days. I mean, I
I've
haven't
been
hit
abandoned.
right. and and sometimes he would be gone like way far away, or at least to me it felt really far away. The woods is smaller now because I mean, having so much knowledge about it, I hunt in the same couple thousand acres of public land that I always will, in Pennsylvania. But sometimes I remember one time I was sitting and he'd been gone for hours and I hadn't looked behind me, which is what, as a hunter, you should always be looking in
Yeah.
360 directions.
Yep.
I turned around and he was sitting back there about 100 yards away from me, 300, 400 feet, just watching me watching. And I thought he was light years away.
Yeah.
And so I bring that moment up, which I hadn't thought about that for a while. I bring that moment up in that even if he didn't realize it, it was forcing me in the most loving way. This is how I interpret it, to be alone, to be alone in your heart, alone in your thoughts. And I don't mean that that's to drive a person crazy or miss that about being around people, but to think for yourself, be in yourself. And that might be one of the main reasons why I started to appreciate trees. I started to appreciate the leaves on the trees and a random animal that might run by, not one that I was hunting, but hearing a bird, seeing a squirrel, things like that. And it started to I've heard other people say this, but nature and being in the woods really helps some people, at least me, and others might find that at a beach or somewhere else in nature, where you start to just appreciate the little things, the little grub worm that you might see that's right by your feet, that, they're in this even larger world than we are as human beings, and they're doing their thing. And then you can look at that and get to appreciate it. So I'm still going. Are we okay on time? Because I want to share
Good.
more
We're
things.
good.
All right. So that was one huge piece early on in that time frame. As a teenager, and in high school, I started to have I started to get some success, and I would get deer and turkeys, and we would consume them at so that helped me feel better. But the loss of life was starting to really bother me. Speaking of highly sensitive people, and I wasn't at the point to realize that the meat that you buy from the store or that's loss of life too.
Yeah.
Even the plants that we could consume. Yes, being a vegetarian probably limits some of the animals that have to sacrifice for you, but also there's weed killer that's sprayed on that, or there's a particular plot of land that there's planted soybeans as an example. Well, that means that there can't be other regular
Yeah.
natural trees, and the animals that could have existed there don't exist. So I
Right.
would say everything is a sacrifice, but I mean that with love. And what I'd say for me in high school, in order to reconcile the loss of life that I was committing, I'll put it that way, by harvesting a deer, by shooting a deer and eating it, is that I needed to put back what once I needed to be thankful and have gratitude for that sacrifice. So what did I
Yeah.
start doing? I started anytime I would get a deer, I would walk up to it, and before I did anything at all, I would put my hand on its back or on its body somewhere, and I would thank it for its sacrifice. I would thank God for the opportunity,
Yeah.
and I do it to this day. I do it right at the moment that that happens to provide gratitude, same way that you might or I do now to sit down at a meal and express gratitude to say, thank you, animal or plant, for the sacrifice you've given. Thank you for the sacrifice of the earth and the water and the ground and the sunlight that brought all that together.
Yeah.
And I know that the culture I am in growing up um, wouldn't that wouldn't be their first thing to be gratitude. And until maybe my dad watches this or hears me say it, he doesn't know that I do that. He probably wouldn't be surprised. He doesn't be enough at this point. He's like, okay. It wasn't as if anyone told me to do that, not consciously.
Yeah.
So those are the pieces that have led me to say, between that and the sunrise, the animals, and the way in which I do that, um, that's how I have found spirituality. Um,
That's great.
yeah, I know that's an over answer, and
No,
that's how I
I,
feel.
I think it's important for people to hear that perspective. And I'm sure there's many people who will listen to this and think, I feel the same way. Maybe in a different, they may carry it out in different ways, but a lot of things that you mentioned in that answer, first of all, I think in our technological world,
Right.
and in the concrete jungle, we end up missing out on a lot of beautiful things because and I'm very guilty of it myself. The TV's on. I'm scrolling, and
Right.
I'm doing this, doing that. Our minds are so engaged with the moment
Yep.
that we don't have an opportunity to go outside and feel the world.
It's an appreciation of the earth. And George and I talk about this a lot. And yes, ideally, you go outside and you breathe air, or
Yes.
some of the kids kind of say this now, go touch grass, or you need to touch grass, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
And yes, that's wonderful to go do that. You could also do that sitting on your couch. If there's a piece of wood that's on your couch, or my hand right now on a desk, you can't see it. This is wood that came from somewhere. Even if it's fabricated,
Yeah.
there are pieces within it that are connected to the earth.
Started out somewhere.
Right. And then
Yeah.
you can appreciate it in that way. Yeah, I mean, Seti, it's huge. Speaking of the concrete jungle, or speaking of cities, I know it's difficult for some of your audience that might be watching to say, well, that sounds all well and good, Adam, that you can go out into thousands of acres in public land because you have that access. And you're right. I am
Yeah.
grateful for that.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate for that. Typically, at least in a city, there's at least a plant somewhere, even if it's a house plant. There might be
Yeah.
a tree that's right next to the sidewalk. And even as, cliche as it is now to hug a tree or put your hand on a tree or just look at the leaves and
Yeah.
appreciate that from your heart, that is a piece of nature that has been provided for all of us to enjoy.
Yeah. And there's a lot of thank you for that, because there's a lot of value in disconnecting sometimes.
Yeah.
And I've gotten back into the habit of reading when I go to bed, or I'm getting ready for bed, because it's I've noticed that my mind is seeking social media or something else,
Right.
where I'm not really learning about anything. It's just scrolling. It's mindless stuff. Whereas I grew up always reading a book, and that's how I learned about other cultures, about the world, about other people,
Right.
or the ideas of other people. And I really think that unfortunately we're doing the next generation a disservice by not helping them understand the beauty of nature and the beauty of the world and the beauty of people
I agree.
and their belief systems. So,
You know,
any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, Seti, I do want to respond to that if I may.
Yeah,
Technology is a wonderful thing. That's what
I
made
wouldn't
it.
have a job if I did, right?
Well, right. I mean, that's what made it possible for you and I to talk
Yeah,
across, vast distances, and for people to be able to watch this and hopefully glean, even if they watch, you know, 30 seconds of it, they might get something of value for them. And so when you lean into technology in good ways, that's wonderful. And you mentioned about reading. One thing I'll share with you is that I'm out of this phase for right now. And what I mean by that is I haven't done it for a couple of weeks because of this, because of what you're doing, what I'm doing. But when I did read, and I'll pick it back up. When I did read, I still felt this pull of, oh, I need to be posting on Twitter, on X. I need to be
yeah,
posting. I need to be doing this. So what did I do? Because I still had that feeling and it was so distracting, I could have just said, no, I'm not going to do it. But then I thought, well, if Adam, you really need to be posting, why don't you post on what you're reading about? So I
yeah,
turned it into my own public notes or public journal type thing.
yeah,
And I didn't just write it from my words. I used a little bit of AI to kind of generate those things. Some people may have read it, some people haven't. But I
yeah,
can tell you this, when I finished that book or those series of books and I had all those things, now when I'm posting on X or when I think of something, even in this conversation here, I think of that one post that I made and I go back to it. Kind of like your tote of journals that you've, read, not maybe in the same situation as books, but me taking those notes is a way to try to lean into technology to a certain point, but also keep yourself grounded and realizing that you need to have breaks. I was able to force myself to read a lot of heavy books and still be able to kind of assuage that part of me saying, "Oh, I should be unplugged from social media, but I really want to be helping people. I want to help. I want to help." And that's how I kind of framed it that way. So
yeah. That's awesome. It's kind of like your online book club.
yeah, I guess a little bit, and I have gotten some good feedback about it. unconditional love. I didn't need that, but I love seeing that it helps people. And that's what I'd like to kind of wrap up from my side, at least. You mentioned about anything I'd like to say is parting. I want to say this directly to anyone watching this. Um, Higher vibrations and helping each other, even in the way Seti helps me, even in this conversation, that I think is what really matters, not the goodness or the badness or the rightness or the wrongness of some specific act or some simple thing. Talking with each other, even if you don't always agree, trying to stay away from divisive fighting for sure. That's what I would like to do and give to other people with nothing in return other than hopefully it helps them. So, Seti, I appreciate you making time to talk with me today. And I appreciate anyone that has watched this for this long because I know we've gone over an hour. Um, Thank you. I appreciate you, Seti, and I appreciate all of you very much.
I thank you as well. It's a great way to close things out, Adam. Thank you for making the time. Appreciate all of your insights. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I'm blessed to have this association with you and to have this opportunity um, for me to have this conversation. But I think others will be blessed by some of your insights as well. So, to close things out, if everyone, for everyone who's listening, please comment, share, subscribe. We'd love, Adam and I would both love to hear your thoughts on some of the things that we've talked about today. Um, Going all in, see him on X, Rumble, YouTube, etc. Same thing with the Black Sand Journals. We look forward to all interactions and hopefully being able to make new friendships and relationships from here on out. So
Yeah.
please share this with all your friends, like us, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you, Adam. I
All right.
appreciate you very much.
Thank you,
Take
Seti.
care.